Wrong thing. What is up, guys? And in today's video, my mom's gonna be reacting to Zack D films.
From the moment the gorilla was born,
The gorilla
cared for him
Jinx.
like part of his family. They lived together for 5 years until eventually the time came to release him. It was sad but necessary. 5 years later, the man went back to the jungle, and when he called, the gorilla suddenly appeared. But he didn't know if he remembered him. He ran toward the man, and for a moment, he feared for his life.
Yeah, you should.
But as soon as the gorilla reached him, he
Don't worry,
embraced
it's a
him
loving
and cuddled
gorilla.
up to his old friend.
The
He
gorilla
even
loves
introduced
you.
him to his friends.
These are my
And when it
gorilla
came time
friends.
to say goodbye, the gorilla didn't want to let go. From
The
moment
gorilla
the
loves
gorilla
him.
was born, the man
I thought that
cared
was
for him
gonna
like
have a
part of his
bad
If you
gorilla
removed
ending.
the bricks in the
Oh, shoot.
Great Wall of China and replaced them with human bodies, how many would it take to
I'm sorry, what?
If you removed the bricks in the Great Wall of China and replaced them with human
That's
bodies,
what I thought he
how
said.
many would it take to
That
complete
escalated
the wall?
quickly.
Well, the wall is made of 700 million cubic feet.
What does Zack D films think about?
Average person only takes up around 2.5
Lying in bed like, even
cubic
if I
feet.
removed all the
So
bricks
to
in the Great Wall of
rebuild
China
the
and replaced them with
entire thing,
corpses.
you would need around 300 million people.
And then he figures it
stacked up
out.
together for thousands
you
of
do
miles. But after only one day, it would start to rot, meaning the whole thing
And then he
would
thinks about
collapse,
that.
and you would have to build it with
And then it would
something else.
stink.
If you removed the shipping container fell and landed straight on the
Whoops.
couple's car. It instantly crushed it flat. And when rescuers got to the scene, they were
Rescuers?
sure no one had survived.
No way.
But suddenly, they heard yelling. You see, even though it was crushed, the passengers were simply pushed down.
They didn't have
with the
bones.
car,
They were just made of
leaving
skin,
just
so they were
enough
fine.
space for their bodies inside. Rescuers rushed to lift the container and saw a hand reach out and give a thumbs up.
No.
And after pulling them
They're
out,
like, I'm good.
both people survived with only minor injuries.
Minor
Just
injury.
got a little paper
The
cut on my
shipping
elbow.
container fell, and your arms and legs would be tied to a large
This
wheel
seems like
if
the
they
worst
wanted
method of
torture
torture.
you. Next, they would shove you down a steep hill. With every
Worst
bounce,
method of
Looks like it
torture.
should be fun
as it
if
traveled, it would pick up
differently
speed.
executed.
Eventually, every tiny bump would
Like
send
maybe
you
getting
flying
in it?
into the air, and every landing would have the same force as a car crash.
Oh my
this would break
gosh.
every bone
Oh
in your
my
body.
God.
And if you somehow survived, you'll wish you were dead. Your arms and legs would be... The crab is strapped down and pierced through the heart to drain its blue blood.
It's a
And
medicine.
This is used to test medicines for contamination. If there are any dangerous bacteria inside, the crab blood will start to turn solid. But if nothing happens, it's safe to inject.
So my medicine
Now, the crabs are released
that I'm
crab
putting in
blood
my
into the ocean
veins
after
has
their
crab
blood's
blood in
taken.
it?
But over 500,000 of them are bled every year, and not all of them
That's
survive.
not-
Meaning, if
It's
you have
just
ever
like
gotten
Not
shot,
all of them
What if
survive?
have
What if
blood
there's bad bacteria inside of your medicine?
I know, but
is
there's gotta be a
strapped
different
down
way.
and pierced
There isn't.
through the heart.
Yeah, but they've never
An
tried.
entire water
They've never
tower
found a
of
different way.
vodka.
I need to
A
understand
crab-
what's
if you
happening here.
drank an entire water
It's another
tower of
late night
vodka,
Zack
your liver
thought
would
here.
start to break it down, but it can only process about one standard drink per hour. And a water tower holds over 400,000 gallons. That would be over 39 million drinks.
He has to get up and
To
get his
break that
calculator.
down, your liver would have to work non-stop for more
Notebook,
than 4,000
pencil.
years. But to do it in one night, you would need a liver the size of about 50 blue whales.
Pretty big.
If you drank and he opened his closet, but instead discovered a bathroom. Confused, he asked his roommates what happened to the closet. They looked at him like he was joking, insisting it had always been a bathroom. He assumed that they had pulled off
like,
an
"Are you
elaborate
high?"
prank while he was gone. But as days passed, his confusion turned to panic. He couldn't even remember what the closet looked like. He thought he was losing his mind, so he went to the doctor. After some tests, they
found
a
out that they
brain
were
tumor
spiking
that
his
caused
meds with
memory
meth.
loss and hallucinations.
Oh, that's not
meaning
nearly
it
as
had
good.
always been a bathroom. He opened his closet.
I wanna know more.
but
Was it a,
instead,
like,
razor blade
malignant
was
tumor?
placed on a moving arm, which was lowered with a crank. As the arm ran on a track, the razor was pressed against a
No, that's just
grinding
like an
disc.
actually not
This was
Zack
covered in
thought.
tiny, hard bumps. As the blade slid across it, small fragments were chipped off, gradually sharpening the the edge. After a few cranks, a mechanism lifted the arm, and the blade was rotated, being placed back on the grinder. Once both sides of the razor were incredibly sharp, it would be placed in a handle and
That
used
makes
to
a lot of
shave.
sense.
A razor blade was
Ah,
placed on a
that's
moving
cool.
arm, which was
That makes a lot
look.
of
The
sense.
boy's throat was full of sores,
Oh,
and his
yikes.
airways were covered in mucus. Soon,
Oh.
the disease spread through the remote Alaskan town, but the medicine was almost
I just read the
700
title.
miles
Husky
away.
with dog.
In
Donald
the middle
Trump,
of
2
winter,
million unworking
plane
holidays
engines
in
wouldn't even
America.
guide the
It's costing
boy's
our
throat.
country
Can you
billions.
shut up?
Hold on.
Okay, hey guys, we're
The
back.
boy's throat
Sorry.
was
We're
full
gonna
of
get this just in
sores,
case you
and
need
his
it.
airways were covered in mucus.
Yum.
Soon, the disease spread
Yum.
through the remote Alaskan town, but the medicine was almost 700 miles away.
Oh, I could run that
In
in
the
an
middle of winter,
hour.
plane engines wouldn't even start. Instead, a dog sled team stepped forward. They traveled night and day through a dangerous snowstorm, while temperatures dropped to
That's
negative
helpful, thanks.
62 degrees. Several dogs
Negative
died
62.
from exhaustion, but after
Oh, that
5
dog was
days of constant
miserable.
traveling, they finally arrived, and the town was saved by the dedication of
They
the
just needed a
dogs.
first aid kit.
The boy's throat was full of sores.
I feel like
and
they
his
could have got that at
airways were covered in
Walgreens.
mucus. Sue, guide the floss through the ring.
Well, I've done this.
Stuck
I've done
won't
this.
come off.
You have?
Then
I've
wrap
done
it
this.
tightly
Before
around
I
your
watched
finger,
this video, I've
starting
done
at the
this.
ring
Did it hurt?
and
To get
moving
rings
up
off
toward
someone in the
knuckle.
ICU.
Did it
Now,
work?
grab the
It
end of the
absolutely
floss,
worked. It
take
took a
out
little
the
bit of time.
ring,
It took time.
and start
No.
slowly unwrapping
Took
it.
probably
As the
about an
floss
hour because they had
unwinds,
rings on
it pushes
every
the
finger,
ring
but
upward,
Why?
sliding it over the wrapped
it was an
section.
older lady that
With
had a
each
lot of
turn, the
That
ring
does
rings.
actually look like it'd be a
until
great
it
shot.
finally slips off.
Everyone was very impressed.
Guide the floss through the ring. If it's stuck, it won't come off. Then they
Sorry.
spend thousands of dollars on tickets, expecting a luxury festival.
Hold on, I'm confused.
Guide
Wait.
the floss through the
What?
ring.
You're
If
out?
it's
Wait, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What is happening?
Hold on. Okay, here, scroll back down.
They spend
Where's that?
thousands of dollars on
Don't
tickets,
worry about it.
expecting a
I do
luxury
worry.
festival in the Bahamas. Private
can worry.
cabanas, gourmet meals, and famous
Bananas?
bands awaited them. But when they arrived,
Famous
they were
bananas.
pointed to wet tents and soaked mattresses. And instead of gourmet food, they got cheese sandwiches.
Not
People
good.
started
Not good
Cheese
food.
sandwiches is
fighting
food.
over supplies, and the
Good
festival was
They're
quickly
fighting over cheese
canceled.
sandwiches?
But when they tried to leave, there were no flights, leaving people stranded for hours. The organizer was eventually jailed for the scam, but he announced a second
Will you push
festival
that up for me?
as soon as he got out. They spent
Why?
thousands of dollars
Scroll.
on tickets. If
know
someone
what-
shot you, but you had massive muscles, could the bullet be stopped? Well, a 9mm hits with
That's
enough
absurd.
force to punch deep into soft tissue and shatter bone. To stop it with muscle, your chest would need to be nearly 10 inches thick of solid, densely
Mine
packed
is.
muscle. That's more than double the size of Arnold Schwarzenegger in
Yeah.
his prime. And even if you could grow that much, you'd weigh hundreds of pounds and barely be able to move.
Yeah.
If someone
That's me.
shot you, she dove into an Arctic whale tank. But as she sank to
Uh-oh.
the bottom, the freezing temperature sent her legs into paralyzing
pool?
cramps, and it was impossible to resurface. But as she began to drown, a beluga whale saw her panicking. Now,
Aw.
these whales are known for their intelligence and playfulness
empathy.
towards humans, and it could tell something was wrong. It swam over to the drowning woman and used its nose to start pushing her out of the water. And just as she was about to run out of breath, the beluga thrust her above the surface, where she could finally gasp for air.
And then she took one
She
breath and it
dove
pushed her
into
back
an
down.
Arctic whale tank. The pole shot
Gotcha.
out of the briefcase if someone tried to steal it. This happened when the wrist strap was disconnected, triggering the telescopic poles to extend. And this made it impossible to run with. Next,
Oh.
the handle would clamp down on their hand,
That'd be so
locking it
cool
in
to see.
place and crushing their fingers. And only a special key could deactivate the mechanism. As the thief struggled to
Ow.
escape, the owner could alert the police. But it was just as likely to trap the real owner, meaning it never really became popular. The
What?
pole shot out of the briefcase. She fell into the septic tank after walking over the cracked lid.
What's a septic tank?
Sewer. Like where the poop and pee goes. I heard about this.
The pole,
She was down
she
there,
fell
but
into
they
the
got her after
septic
several
tank
hours,
after
and she was
walking
fine.
over the cracked lid. Her mother screamed for
Take
help,
a bath.
and within
Help!
seconds, bystanders came running. One man dove in head first, but had to come back up after swallowing sewage.
Why would he
Another
dive in
was
head
lowered by
first?
his ankles, blindly searching through the water until he found her
And then
arm.
she graduated high school, and he went to her high school graduation.
Did you know?
The guy that saved her.
They pulled her out, and she was lifeless.
Made
but
me
a
pretty
nurse
emotional.
in the crowd jumped in, giving
That was me. I
mouth-to-mouth
was the nurse in the crowd.
CPR. And the girl
Why don't
started
you give
breathing
mouth
again.
CPR with a girl who looks like that?
Yeah, but it's a little kid, so you wouldn't even
Rushed
think
to the
about it.
hospital and somehow survived. She fell into the as the mosquito drops the eggs between your toes. They
Ew.
hatch from your body's heat, and tiny larvae dig under your
That
skin.
is larva.
As they feed and grow, they form a
I don't
small
know.
and
I don't know
painful
ever knew
bump
this. Where did you
that
activate
oozes
this?
pus out of a small
Yeah,
hole.
it's back
To
in.
remove it, a doctor
Stop
will
it.
seal its breathing hole with petroleum jelly,
what?
suffocating the worm until it wriggles upward,
Worm?
gasping for air. Then they carefully grip the slimy larva's body with tweezers, pulling it slowly
What?
from your flesh.
Mosquito
As
worms?
the mosquito drops the eggs between your toes,
Oh, it's a botfly.
they hatch from your body's heat. He crashed
I
his
had a kitten with a
motorcycle
botfly in
and
its neck
seriously
before.
damaged his leg. If you swap, he crashed his motorcycle and seriously damaged his legs. Now this ruined his career as a chef, and even after
Hold
10
on.
surgery.
He hurt his legs and it ruined his career as a chef? Does he cook with his legs?
He still couldn't stand. But instead of giving up, he had a rail installed in his kitchen ceiling. Then a curved bar was attached and a seat was added. This could take his weight and swing in every direction, allowing
That's
him to
cool.
keep the career that he loved.
That looks so
Crashed his
fun.
motorcycle and serious. If you swapped brains with your mom, would you be you inside
No, I would be dead.
your mom's body? Well, doctors would have to remove both brains without damaging them.
That's sad.
Then each one would need
Yes.
to be placed into the other person's
I
skull.
use humor to
Now,
mask
your
my
brain
pain.
connects to your body through millions of tiny
it
nerves
right?
in your spinal cord. So to make the swap work, every single nerve would need to be reconnected perfectly so you could move,
Which would take a
feel,
couple
and think
minutes.
like normal. But even if it were possible, some memories and personality are tied to your own physical body, meaning something would feel off, and you might
Yeah.
never fully be yourself again.
I think it's that
Foolish.
happened in a
Brain.
mirror.
The backpack was strapped to the bird as it flew into
What?
the prison.
Pigeon.
The guards
I love
noticed.
pigeons.
They
We should
chased
try
it
them.
through the yard and finally cornered it. And when they opened the bag, they found an ounce of crystal meth.
Whoops.
Now, some think the pigeon was trained to wear the backpack, fly into the prison, and deliver the package to the criminals inside. But this would have taken months of training, meaning it was probably just tossed over the fence instead. The backpack was
The bird
strapped
was
to the
tossed over
bird
the-
as it flew into the prison.
What?
When the pharaoh died,
Don't
they
worry
would
about it.
strangle some servants while poisoning others. As they collapsed, they were buried in graves beside the king's tomb, along with some of his girlfriends and even his dogs. This was so they could go with the pharaoh to the
Yeah, it
afterlife and continue serving him. And hundreds of them were sacrificed this way, making sure he was well taken care of
Two more.
even after death. When the pharaoh died, after delivering the baby, he carved his initials in her skin with a scalpel. And even though the nurses
okay.
saw, they didn't tell the patient. When she got home, she
I'd
felt
be like, hey man, that
excruciating
wasn't cool,
pain.
but
And
oh.
when she looked in the mirror, she was horrified at what she saw. The cuts left permanent scars, meaning she needed extensive plastic surgery.
Why?
She sued the
Like-
doctor for almost $2 million. And
Oh.
even though he lost his medical license, he never went to prison for his crime.
Yeah, he
After
paid by
as the
losing his
heavy
medical
ball
license
rolled over
that he
them,
worked for at least 8 to 10 years, so I feel like that's punishment enough.
As the heavy ball rolled over them, the landmines would explode. It would be built from nearly 200 bamboo arms with large plates on the
Bamboo
ends.
doesn't have
a tracker
arms.
in the
No,
center
that's cool.
would guide it across minefields, and its weight would detonate the mines buried underground. It could handle the force of several explosions before it needed to return for repairs. This ball could replace those who risked their lives doing this job. As the heavy ball rolled, she was reaching into a donation
Oh
bin
my
when
gosh.
someone pushed her from
No.
behind. The heavy door slammed
That gives
shut
me
and she fell
anxiety.
inside.
I would die
These
just from the
bins are built
claustrophobia.
with one-way
I almost
flaps
said
that swing
constipation.
inward once you fall
I would
No, you
die from the constipation.
No, you didn't.
Yes.
No, you didn't
I
say
knew
that.
it started with a C, and I thought
You said claustrophobia.
I said I almost said constipation. I would die from the constipation.
Box behind
I've been
you.
talking to Kevin
There's
too
no
much.
handle or latch, just smooth metal and steep walls too high to climb. She screamed for help, but no one heard her.
We
And for
can
3
we can
days,
link
she
the
lay
Kevin
curled
video.
up on old clothes.
Oh, yes, we
no
should.
food or water. Finally,
We're
someone heard her
recording
cries,
remember, like,
and
a long time ago.
firefighters
Oh,
came
live
out.
stream?
But this wasn't her first time. She'd already been rescued from a donation bin 2 times before.
Oh, come on.
She was reaching into a
That's like
donation
Sonny,
bin.
who blew himself up with a cigarette multiple times and didn't learn his lesson.
When someone pushed her
I don't hear anybody.
she was reaching into a
you
donation
already
bin.
watch this?
He
Yeah.
opened the package and pulled out a sleek-looking
This is
headset with
fiction.
no branding, only a QR code. He scanned it,
I didn't know. I
downloaded
thought
the
Zack
game,
Films
and
did
hit
true
launch.
stuff.
He hesitated for
Zack Films will do fiction, but I'll put it in the title.
Oh,
Like one about
the giant oyster would
wanna
snap
watch
its
it?
shell closed.
fiction
He
videos are very
opened
cool.
the package and pulled out a sleek-looking headset with no branding, only a QR code. He scanned it, downloaded the game, and hit launch. He hesitated for a moment, but decided to put on the headset. Immediate bright flashes filled his vision, a loud, deafening tone. Then everything went black. He woke up on his floor, dying of thirst and hopelessly confused. His phone buzzed and he picked it up. 55 missed calls, hundreds of texts. He looked at the date. 2 days had gone by. He scrolled through the messages. Please turn yourself in. How could you? Why? His mom's message read, I still love you, but you have to go to the cops. One message included a video link. He clicked it. It was him, lighting a house on fire.
oof.
He was committing multiple terrible crimes. But when he turned to get the headset, it was gone, along with his computer. Sirens approached. Red and blue flooded his room, heart beating out of his chest. His eyes caught the back door, and he decided to run. He opened the package and
That's
pulled
super
out a
obviously
sleek-looking
fiction, right?
headset with no
What the heck
branding.
happened after they
The
just
giant
ran?
oyster would snap its shell closed, trapping you inside. Then it would coat you with a sticky slime that holds you in place. And since there's no air inside, you'd start to suffocate. Once you're dead, it would slowly start to layer a shiny, smooth material on top of your body. After hundreds of layers, you'd be completely encased, turning you into a human-shaped
That's not
pearl.
human shaped.
The giant oyster would snap its shell closed.
A human-shaped pearl. I feel like that would be worth a lot of money.
That would be too.
When he saws through the assistant, you would expect blood and guts to spill onto the floor. But when the box is placed over her, the magician blocks her feet from the view of the audience. And within a few seconds, the assistant pulls her legs up and squishes her whole body into the first half. At the same time, her feet are replaced with remote-controlled ones in the second half. And when the saw blade comes down, it looks like she's being sliced in half, with the legs wiggling. But the blade never actually touches her. When he saws through, if your mouth was
Except for her
permanently
face
sealed
being
shut,
happy and-
doctors would insert a tube through your nose.
Whoa, where
If
does
your
mouth go?
If your mouth was permanently sealed shut, doctors would insert a tube through your nose, going all the way down to your stomach. Then liquid food would flow through the tube and straight into your gut.
It's called an
now,
NG
since you
tube.
can't breathe through your mouth, your nose would have to take over. But if it got clogged, doctors would cut a small hole in your neck and insert a tube. This would allow air
Called
to
a
go straight
tracheostomy.
into your windpipe, so you could breathe without using your nose. Eventually, they would make an incision in your torso and place a permanent feeding tube directly into your
It's called a
stomach.
pig tube.
If your mouth was permanently sealed shut, if your kitten grew to the size of a tiger,
That'd be
you
awesome.
might think it would be cute. But it would weigh over 600 pounds, and unlike a wild animal, it wouldn't be afraid of you. A single pounce would be enough to shatter your rib cage, and a gentle bite would crush your bones. As it played, it would bat your head like a toy, breaking your neck, and when it got tired, it could curl up on your chest, slowly choking you to death. If your kitten grew to the size
one
of
to
a
cuddle.
tiger, you If you jumped out and aimed for a giant trampoline, you might think it would bounce you hundreds of feet back up
No.
into the air.
You'd go straight
but in
through it.
reality, hitting the trampoline at that speed would feel like slamming into concrete. The force would cause the fabric to rip instantly, and the springs and metal poles would bend and snap from the impact. You wouldn't even bounce. You just crash straight through
You'd
to
go
the ground.
straight through the earth.
If you jumped out and aimed, if you pulled out your femur and got a splinter from it, would your body reject
Wait,
it like
what?
a normal splinter? Well, the nurse, if you pulled out your femur and got a splinter from it, would your body reject it?
A femur
like a
splinter?
Well, the bone is made up of your cells, meaning your immune system wouldn't see it as a foreign object. Instead, it would become part of your finger as your skin grew around.
Wait.
If you pulled out your femur and got a splinter from it, would your body reject it like a normal splinter? Well, the bone is made up of your cells, meaning your immune system wouldn't see it as a foreign object. Instead, it would become part of your finger as your skin grew around it. And if it was really small, your body would start to break down the bone cells. These would be absorbed into your blood, meaning the splinter would totally disappear. If you pulled
That's
out your
not
femur
even
and
that
got
interesting
nurses
at all.
would shine a lamp on the baby's skin through a stencil with its initials. This lamp would gently burn the letters onto the baby, leaving
Why?
a faint glowing mark that looked like a secret code. It let nurses quickly match each child with their mom, avoiding accidental mix-ups in the
There's gotta be an
chaos
easier
of the
way, like
nursery.
a bracelet.
But it never caught on, since a soft reusable bracelet did the same thing without burning the baby. Nurses would shine as it stepped onto the pressure plate. The weight would set off a spring-loaded trigger. This would fire a gun, sending a bullet straight at the rodent. The sound would alert the owner that the trap had gone off, so they could dispose of the mouse and reset the trap. But if a person accidentally stepped on it, the bullet would shoot them in the foot, which is why this device never really caught on. As it stepped onto the pressure, if you stuck a long sword out of a car aiming for a tree, the sword would obviously snap and rip from your hands. But what if the sword is unbreakable, you have an indestructible grip, and your body is physically immovable? Well, the force would then transfer to the car. It would screech to a halt as the sword hits. But what if the car
I feel like it would just rip you out of the car.
But you can't
and
move.
is forced to keep moving. Now the tree should split in half. But if the tree is indestructible too, with no way to break, bend, or stop, the energy has nowhere to escape. Would this unleash a massive shockwave
That would
as
just move
powerful
the
as
tree.
a nuclear explosion?
No.
Or worse, something reality itself is an
That's
equivalent
not what it do.
to contain. If you stuck a long sword at the whales, if you
I want
stuck
to
a
try
long
it just to
sword
see if
out
it
of a car,
alters reality.
Okay, you want to,
whales, if you stuck
you want to find an invincible tree, and you get your invincible sword, and get out your invincible grip, and your invincible car, but cannot stop moving, with your invincible seating position, and then try it with the tree.
Yeah,
I
and
think
alter reality.
Why'd you, what would it do? What do you think it would do?
Allow me to enter different dimensions.
That's actually what you think it would do.
the whale swallowed the man and his kayak whole.
Jonah?
Before he could react, he was inside the whale's
Jonah.
mouth.
He lived in the
surrounded by
belly of the
darkness
whale.
And thick, slimy rows of teeth. For a few terrifying moments, its massive jaws closed, trapping him inside. Then, just as suddenly, the whale spit him back out, and the man swam away completely unharmed. The whale, if you lose a lot of weight, your skin might not shrink back, leaving behind loose, hanging folds. To remove it, a surgeon makes a long incision across your stomach.
No, thank
They
you.
lift the skin and separate it from the underlying muscles, exposing the fat and tissue beneath. Then they carefully measure and cut away the excess skin.
No.
The top portion is pulled down tight to stop it from sagging, and a new opening for the belly button is created. Finally, it's stitched back together, leaving you with tighter skin. If you lose a lot of weight,
But
your
what about
skin,
my old
she
belly
took
button?
the photo. A shotgun shell suddenly exploded from the camera. The pellets lodged themselves into the woman's leg, and the photographer was immediately arrested. Police questioned her and were shocked by her story. You see, her boyfriend had given her the camera, telling her to follow a jewel thief. He said it would take X-ray images, revealing the stolen gems. But the thief was actually the man's ex-wife, and she didn't steal any jewelry. The man was tracked down by police and killed in a shootout, and his ex-wife lost her leg to the injuries. As she took the photo, the bullet is fired. It gets stuck inside the metal ball attached to the barrel, and as it flies toward the criminal, the weight slows it down by 80%. Once it hits, the ball spreads the bullet's force over a larger area, meaning it's less likely to penetrate the skin and instead just leave bruises. This stops the person from attacking, but leaves them relatively unharmed. When the bullet is fired, if they tripped on the wire, it would set off a hidden gun in the graveyard. You see, grave robbers would dig up corpses at night, selling them to medical students for research. To stop them, these guns were set up at the foot of the graves, and 3 tripwires were attached, fanning out in every direction. If the robbers set one off, the gun would swivel to face him, shooting him down before he could steal the corpse. If they tripped, when you shave, the blade scrapes off the top layer of your skin. This can lead to ingrown hairs, where the hair grows back into the skin instead of outwards. Additionally, bacteria can enter these tiny cuts, causing redness and swelling. And over time, this can cause a red rash known as razor burn. When you shave, the blade scrapes off the top layer. While talking to her fiancé, she mentioned that a truck was circling her. Then the truck stopped and a man got out, but he quickly got back inside and shined a flashlight around. She thought nothing of it, but a moment later, her fiancé heard her scream. He drove as fast as he could to help her, but on the way, he heard someone call his name from the truck that passed by. He turned around to chase it, but damaged his car, bringing him to a stop. And despite years of searching, she was never seen again.
Oh, what a happy ending.
When you rub a balloon on your head, tiny electric charges move to your body, giving you the power to zap your friends. But how big would the balloon have to be for you to make lightning? Well, if the balloon was the size of a car, it would only power a flashlight for a second.
Late night
Grow it to the size of a mansion, and you could actually charge your phone.
How did she figure that out?
The size of Earth, rubbed across your head millions of times.
I know, I want to be in his brain for one night. What does this man think about when he's lying in bed? I'm thinking about what book I can read next, and he's thinking about how many balloons you use to make lightning.
That's actually a pretty common thing.
No amount of struggling could free it. Adults desperately tried to save him as he lost consciousness, but it took over 9 minutes to yank him loose.
I'd kiss him and it would save him, but it didn't.
When he was rushed to the hospital, but after 11 days, he finally recovered.
Oh.
He was swimming in a lazy river. The stream can break through the outer layer of your skin in seconds if you're sprayed with a pressure washer. And this is because the machine forces water
but I wouldn't spray my hands.
Which builds pressure.
That was silly of them.
This creates a concentrated stream that's powerful enough to tear
certainly not my arm.
And if held in place long
houses and sidewalks and stuff.
Straight through a finger bone. The stream can break. Thousands of leaflets dropped from the sky, telling him that World War II was over. But he thought it was a trick from the enemy.
He's paranoid. Doesn't trust anyone.
So he stayed hidden
World
in the
War
jungle,
II, they used a lot of meth.
Coconuts and stolen rice. He watched planes fly overhead and thought Japan was still
70,000 years later,
not realizing it was for a
sergeant was like, stand down, soldier.
Finally, 30 years later, his commander showed up and ordered him to stand down. The man
found him in the middle of nowhere.
Over his rifle and finally
I know where he is. He's in a cave up this mountain.
The crocodile lunged out of the pond, clamping onto his foot. It dragged him into the water, shaking him to pull off his limbs. The farmer kicked it and reached for its head before sinking his teeth into its eyelid. After a second, it let go. He managed to escape and used a rope to stop the bleeding. After a month in the hospital, he survived.
But his leg did not.
The rock is strong enough to bench press a motorcycle.
Oh, bullcrap.
But what if he was constantly growing. At 10 feet tall, he'd be strong enough to swap the motorcycle for a grand piano. As he hit 20 feet, he would need to grab an SUV if he wanted a good leg day. And as he grew to 30 feet, he would need to train an elephant to stand on his shoulders while he did squats. The rock is strong enough to bet the bullet was headed straight for the man's chest. But in his pocket, he actually had a Nokia phone. Now, these phones are notorious for
I
their
want to make a vest, a full body, bulletproof suit out of Nokia phones. Yep.
Ability and strength. As the bullet made contact, it ended up hitting the phone. And while the force did shatter it, miraculously,
wipe off my
it
love?
absorbed the impact and stopped the
my
bullet
love?
before it could
You
hit
just
the
wiped it
man's
away.
chest, which ended up saving his life.
Careful, wipe.
The bullet was headed straight for the man's chest, but in his pocket, he actually had a Nokia phone.
You already
Now, these
watched this,
phones
you
are
idiot.
notorious. She fell
Yeah, like
onto
a
the
year
tracks
ago.
and was cut in half by an oncoming
Fine
train.
though. The doctors
Those who hear
revived
the
her.
story of her death are soon haunted by her spirit. The ghost has no lower body,
Man.
and she moves by dragging herself with her hands.
not even
As
fiction.
she
Legend
does,
of
her
Tech
bones
Tech.
make a clicking noise.
It's
giving
the
her
legend,
name
it's not
Tech
real.
Tech. If she finds you walking alone
doesn't
at
say
night,
fiction, I
she'll
believe it.
chase you down with supernatural
Why?
speed. And if she catches you, legend says she'll slice you in half, leaving you legless just like her. She fell onto the tracks and was
One more.
His truck veered off the road and into a steep ravine.
Oh, and he left his
before
dogs in the back of
landing
the
in a
truck. That's so
creek. Now,
irresponsible.
somehow the man survived, but he was severely
dogs
injured
didn't.
and only managed to crawl 100 yards from the wreck. As night fell, he collapsed, exhausted, with only his dogs for company. But one of them left him, running 4
blame him.
miles back to his family. It barked frantically to warn them that something
What?
was wrong.
Timmy stuck in the
and
well?
the next morning, they finally found him. Rescuers pulled him to safety, and he survived.
So the dog ran up to these people 4 miles away, and it's like, woof, woof. And they're like, what? We need to follow you because someone's injured? And then they followed him 4 miles.
All
I don't think
thanks to
that.
his
I'm
loyal
calling
dog.
BS.
His truck veered off. Imagine you woke up.
All right, ladies and gentlemen,
dangling on a
this is the
trapeze
last one.
high in
I like
the
this.
sky.
This is another Zack
Wait.
thought.
Imagine you woke up dangling on a trapeze high in the sky. You
Very
start
feasible.
freaking out. You're so high you can't even see the ground.
Yep, that's why you're
Now,
on a
you have
trapeze in
no
the sky.
idea
It's
how
pretty
you
high.
got here, but a part of you thinks this might be a dream, just because of how odd the situation
Right.
is. I mean, you can't even see where the chains end. This has to be a dream. This means you should just let go and you'll wake yourself up. But it does feel real.
That's what
Been
they
there.
Maybe you shouldn't fall, just in case. Hours turn into days, and you're getting exhausted. You're afraid you're going to fall asleep.
You're
and
exhausted.
let
You're
go
probably
on
not sleeping and
accident.
dreaming.
But maybe that's a good thing. There really isn't any other option, and time is running out. What do?
Let go.
Imagine you woke
Oh.
up the
One more.
spear gun shot directly at his face while he was cleaning
You
it.
like his
It
videos,
entered
don't you?
just above
Yes.
his eye, piercing his skull
You
and
can watch
going
more if you
straight
want.
through the back of his head. And he was still awake when rescuers rushed him to the hospital. Doctors carefully removed the harpoon,
graphic.
but the spear had somehow missed every important part of his brain. The injury did cause
There's
him to
parts
lose
of the
vision
brain that
in
aren't
one
important.
eye, but he escaped death by inches. The
I
spear
love
gun
it.
shot
Thumbs
directly
up.
at his
It's
as
all
they pulled
good.
up to the
Are you gonna
haunted
watch more?
lighthouse. His friend
It's
told
fiction.
him that anyone who went up never came back down. No bodies, no answers, just gone forever. He warned his friend not to go, but curiosity got the better of him. He told him he would call from the top to prove he was okay. Phone in hand, he stepped through the door and disappeared up the stairs. The climb was long, but at the top there was nothing, really. Just a quiet room and an ocean view.
Wasn't even
Not
worth it.
scary at all. He pulled out his phone, but there was no service. And that's when he noticed it. A small room off to
How
the
could you not
side.
notice it
In it
previously?
was an old rotary phone, still connected. He picked it up and called his friend, and let him know he was speaking from an old phone he found in this cool room. The friend froze. There was no phone or room in this lighthouse. He circled the base, looked up, and saw him standing on an old rotting plank, holding
gosh.
his cell phone. A gust of wind came hard off the sea.
Oh, no.
The call cut out, and
Catch him.
the lighthouse remained. As they pulled up to the
You wanna
haunted
watch more?
lighthouse,
One more.
an ice skate
sure?
could slide
You wanna
across
watch
your
more?
fingers and slice
Maybe
them
2 more.
off if you slipped on the rink. And
You
if
can
your
watch as many as you
ring
want.
gets
Wait.
as they an ice skate could slide across your fingers and slice them off if you
He's
slipped.
Well, I
shocked.
don't ever want to go
And
ice
if your
skating.
He's
ring
like-
gets snagged on heavy machinery, it could easily rip your
I lost
finger
my pen.
I'm not
off
wearing
of your hand.
rings.
When you're in a rush,
I lost my
slamming
pen.
doors
It's in
have
here.
been known to smash and sever fingers in a
Maybe
split
I took it
second.
out.
And if you're
No,
holding
look,
a
it's right here, it's right here.
firework when it
The pen was
explodes,
there.
this has also
Yeah, it's
been
not there.
known
I
to
took it
blow
out. I've been
off
holding
fingers.
it.
An ice skate could slide across your fingers
Okay,
and slice them
bye.
off
You don't wanna watch
if you
more?
slip